Hello, Privyet, and welcome, tubers and connoisseurs of fine Imperial and Soviet Russian military. Welcome to another fine episode from CollectorRussia.com. Igor, what do we got today?
A subject that is probably bewildering to many collectors here in the States at least, and that is an order that was established very late in the Soviet era. And that is kind of a mystery, and I'll try to shed some light on it. And it used to be for a long time a minefield for collectors. I'll explain why, and hopefully we'll try to help. And I'm specifically talking about Order for Service to Homeland in the Soviet Armed Forces. This order was established in 1974, one of the last important decorations of the Soviet period. And it's interesting to look into previous history and not just, there is such a such thing, and this is what you want to collect. Well, why was it there in the first place? And the previous Soviet practice was to reward officers, especially commissioned officers, with some sort of decoration or medal for length of service. And this harkens back to imperial times and definitely to late part of World War II, when in late 1944 there was a practice all of a sudden to award decorations, some of them pretty high, for simply being there in the military, actively serving and without major reprimands or issues for at least 10 years. So automatically thousands and thousands of long-serving officers received various decorations, starting from Medal for Combat Service, given for 10 years of service, and going as far as Order of Lenin. So for 25 years of service, one would automatically pretty much receive an Order of Lenin. And I've seen some ridiculous even cases when there was an award commendation that said that such and such is really not up to his position. He is way over his head. He is not a very diligent officer. He is not very well regarded. He probably needs to be demoted. However, because he had 25 years of service, the recommendation is to award him with the Order of Lenin, and lo and behold, Order of Lenin he would receive. So it was kind of strange in this way, but understandable because some reward had to be given. At least this is what Soviet leadership with Stalin at its head thought for just surviving the war and remaining loyal, and they wanted probably those officers to be happy, to feel accomplished. So hundreds of thousands of Soviet orders, some of them pretty high, were given for just that. For 30 years of uninterrupted service, one would receive the second order of the Red Banner. That was unimaginable before. Order of the Red Banner remained technically the highest military award. You could say that was second to Order of Victory, but everything else was actually below it. Even such orders as Kutuzov First Classes were first class. But nevertheless, many received it for just the length of service. In 1958, this practice ended. This was a new era, the period of Khrushchev's austerity, and everybody was kind of put on a reduced ration. Khrushchev had huge ambitions, of course, to overcome the United States in terms of military, in terms of industrial development. That's what he promised. Communism in our lifetime, everybody will receive whatever one wishes. But for that, to get there, one needed to kind of tighten the belt. And indeed, even the military and everybody else was kind of curtailed in the way that even the military uniforms looked. They became much more subdued, much less flashy. And there were cuts in everything, in every budget. And part of it was that high decorations were issued no more for length of service and not issued en masse. As a matter of fact, civilian awards too were given very sparingly during the Khrushchev era as compared to Stalin period, especially late Stalin period. And that changed again during Brezhnev, but that would take many years. But initially, these decorations for length of service, the practice of awarding was abolished, was stopped, and instead to give officers something, they probably felt the need to reward long service for with something at least. They were given medals for length of service, medals for irreproachable service in the Soviet armed forces initially, and then pretty soon for services in other agencies. For example, Ministry of Interior. They had their own version of the long service medal. KGB came up with their own version of long service medal. And this is a very interesting subject for a collector, as a matter of fact. And one can almost endlessly talk about variations of those medals. At some point, each republic had its own Ministry of Interior or Ministry of Protecting Public Order, as it was called for a short period, and there were many variations issued by those republics. So it's a pursuit, and it can take years, if not lifetime, to collect all the versions of long service medal. But medal it remained, and in the order of precedence, on the scale of importance, it was the last Soviet medal of all. One would wear it after all the service, other more important medals on the uniform, even after the Jubilee medals. That's how unimportant it was considered.
Oh, that's very low in the presidency.
Exactly,
Oh.
exactly. Even Jubilee medals were high.
Yeah.
So it is understandable that by 1974, when situation changed in many ways, or so it seemed, in Soviet favor, when there was a period of relative prosperity that replaced the Khrushchev era, when people literally went hungry in many cases. One anecdote I can tell you is my mother, in the early Khrushchev period, when she was probably in middle school or before, fainted from hunger because it was that bad in the at some point in the 50s that everybody suffered really. But by 70s, situation changed. You remember that by 1970s, by the mid 70s, Soviet Union all but won their battle for Southeastern Asia. This outcome of Vietnam War was considered a huge success.
Sure.
And other things that happened was the situation with oil. The Soviet Union had become a major oil exporter by that time. New sources of oil and gas were found in Siberia, and infrastructure was finally built to make it deliverable. And at the same time, there was Arab oil embargo, and there were tensions in the Middle East,
right,
very significant, and gasoline prices went through the roof. So all of that was hugely in favor of the Soviet Union in general, and Soviet military too. And apparently Brezhnev, being very lavish with decorations for himself, first of all, and his cronies, probably felt that, yes, time has come to give something more important than just a lowly medal for length of service. And when I say length of service, I can't say that service to Homeland, order for service to Homeland in the Soviet Armed Forces, was a decoration purely for length of service. You could look at it this way, but there was no definition. There was no definitive way in which they awarded it. It was very ambiguous, very vague, in a typically verbose late Soviet style. What the law said about eligibility for this decoration. One thing was very clear, and there could be no mistake made about it. Only officers could receive it. And you could see at that point a fully established system of classes. Of course, they continued to pretend that the Soviet Union was a classless society, but in reality, everybody knew it was anything but. So there was an entrenched system of ranks, of classes. Officers were their own class of people, and commissioned military officers were eligible for higher awards than enlisted personnel. In fact, there were awards, even late Soviet awards, such as Medal for Conspicuous Military Service, first and second class, that were issued to enlisted NCOs, but not to officers. Whereas officers were eligible for order for service to the homeland. That provided, of course, much higher privileges and status. one other thing that's peculiar about this award is that in theory it could be given to any commissioned officer, and we'll touch a little bit on that later, but also it was a sequential award, meaning that one had to be awarded with the second class to be eligible for the first, and one had to be awarded with the third classes. That was the prerequisite for being awarded with the second class, higher class of the order. And that resulted in a huge discrepancy in the number of issues, because 1974, it was a little over 15 years before the end of the Soviet regime. The Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, just, mere 16 or so years later, 17 years later. And for that reason, they didn't have an opportunity to award very many second classes, and not to speak of the first, because there was such a waiting period before you could become eligible. It took a long bureaucratic procedure, and also there were not very many active conflicts going on up until the Soviet invasion in Afghanistan. And for Afghanistan, they would rather, in many cases, they did award service to the Homeland, but it would be third class typically. It would be to lower ranking officers, who, many of them who, those who just started their career. And again, very rarely they would have an opportunity to award somebody with a higher class. So because of that, you see third class awarded approximately 100,000 times. You can see serial numbers that are as high as 140 plus thousand. At least in my experience, I've seen some that were that high, just under 150,000 or so. So apparently more were manufactured, and we know for sure that many were left unissued after the end of the Soviet Union, after the Soviet collapse, and because they were at that point distributed to different places, different locations throughout the USSR to be later issued. They remained unissued, and of course most of them, if not all, made it on the market and became available to collectors. So it's a very common, comparatively speaking, award. Not quite as common, of course, as an Order of the Red Star or even Order of the Red Banner. Of those hundreds and thousands, hundreds of thousands were issued, and even millions sometimes of some of the older decorations, but established earlier, but still relatively common. Whereas of the second class, there were fewer than 600 issues, something on the scale of 589 recorded issued during the Soviet era. And this award was discontinued pretty soon after the collapse of the USSR. So that's a humongous difference. Think about it.
Yes.
Under 600 issues, we are talking something on the scale of, say, Order of Kutuzov first class. And of course, there are differences. Order of Kutuzov, Order of Suvorov, Order of Khmelnytsky first class. They were awarded to top generals, typically, marshals even. Many of them ended up in museums, so availability to collectors may be very limited. Also, some were undoubtedly scrapped after the death of their recipients, as was the Soviet practice. They would take their decorations away. Family could not keep the awards of the deceased family member up until late 70s when this law was rescinded. But those who died earlier, typically the awards at the top, either in museums or in the, have been melted down. So that of course makes it slightly different, or somewhat different. But then there is another side of the coin, and that is that service to the homeland was awarded relatively recently. We are talking people who were on active duty in the military, never retired military, in the 1970s. The order was only awarded to active members of the military. And 1980s. Those were in many cases very young officers at that time. And even those who were colonel level, let's say, or even a general, some of them are still alive, undoubtedly. And even if they passed away, their children still remember this part of history, especially Afghanistan. And these decorations are very much treasured. They are less likely to be sold than some of the earlier, even World War II awards. So with all of that in mind, under 600 issues is a very tiny number, especially for the country the size of the Soviet Union or modern days Russia even, it's still a drop in the bucket, literally. So this award is very scarce, I should even say rare, and it's very frequently faked, unfortunately. We will discuss today how to make it simple for collectors to spot those fakes and to tell very definitively if the second class of the order is original or not. And the way to illustrate it, first of all, I'll put some pictures out, close-ups that are hugely enlarged of those that we had in recent past. And fortunately enough, I actually have a real piece here. This is not always the case. I very rarely find them that I will demonstrate. And also I have a couple of fakes. Now, one word of caution with fakes is don't assume that all fakes look the same. Some people make this mistake. This is a typical amateur error. And they think that once they saw a fake, they know how fakes look like.
Right.
No two fakes have to be alike. They're made in different places. They're made by different people. They're made using completely different technology. And it depends a lot on the skill level of whoever is the faker. And for that reason, you have to really understand how the original looks like. And if it's anything different than what the original should look like, then the simple rule is stay away. Don't play this. This Russian roulette, I should say, with your money. It makes absolutely no sense, and it's fortunately simple enough, or I think so, and I'll try to bring it out. Now, that being said about second class, let's get to the first class just very, very briefly. And I say briefly because, unfortunately, if you are planning to buy one, if you ever thought of finding one for your collection, my advice to you is perish the thought. Forget about it. There were only 13 of them issued throughout the whole Soviet history. 13. 1, 3. That's nothing. Most are still in possession of the recipients or their family members. If any ever ends up on the market, I've heard of only one ever sold. The price is going to be exorbitant. In my opinion, it's insanity to buy one without complete paperwork. And perhaps with the other two, the second and third, that came with it necessarily, with all kinds of documentation and provenance. And again, the price is going to be completely out of reach of most collectors. So for practical purposes, let's not discuss the first class. Let's concentrate on things that are actually achievable. And that's certainly third class and perhaps the second. And let's get to it, and I will try to at least show those fine points.
You have many samples here.
That hopefully help in what used to be a minefield.
All right, then. Let's see what we got.
And here are a couple of examples of the third class. Let's start with that, the simpler part of things. And you will immediately notice some dissimilarities between very late third class and very early. And what I mean by that is not necessarily the time difference and when they were issued. Soviet awards were issued randomly, without any regard to the serial number. The existing inventory was simply distributed to various points and issued just as it was available, and therefore sometimes high serial number can be issued sooner or earlier than the lower serial numbers. These two pieces are case in point. You see, one of them is 44,000 serial number plus, and we know, because we do have research and documentation, that it was issued in 1987. This one was issued just 1 year later, and it's already 95,000 serial number. But what they do illustrate here is the difference between early production, which is what this is, and later production. Most of the orders of service to the homeland that you find on the market these days are of this kind. They are, in most cases, unissued, and it's not a certainty, but if you see a number that's higher than 105, 110,000, it's almost certain that it was not issued to anybody. There are some exceptions from that rule, but generally speaking, as a rule of thumb, you won't be able to research them. With serial numbers below 100,000 or below 105,000, chances are very high that it was actually issued. And we know that this piece was issued. And I will tell you about the story of this piece. It's quite unusual. But what you see as far as the differences in construction is, and this is very important in understanding how to tell originals versus fake and original second class. We'll get to that. You see how stubby this point of the star on the reverse of the starburst on the reverse is compared to this one. We are talking the same element of design. It's the reverse of the starburst.
Yes.
And you can especially see it on horizontal points. So if you put two against each other, you can see that this one is sort of elongated
more
and
skinny.
slender,
Yep.
and this one is very chubby.
Yep.
Okay.
A little thicker.
This chubbiness is a definite mark of early production. Be it third class or any of the second classes. No second class or first class of this order will ever have a slender tip of the starburst on the reverse. You can see it. You won't see it on the front from the reverse, but you can very clearly see it on the reverse. So when you see something like this, and it has gilt on the front, and that's the only major difference between second, first, and third classes is the amount of gilt. And it's very easy to take it apart. You can see how easily it can be unscrewed. This is the retaining nut. I don't want to take pliers, but it can be done very easily with some effort at least.
Just unscrew the back.
And you don't have to be a professional. You can put it apart, take it apart. You can put gilt on, say, the star and the tips of the rockets. And voila, you have second class.
Wow.
Only the problem is it will be a fake second class.
That's
and
right.
I'll show how. Vast majority of fake second and first classes of this order that you see on the market are made out of this late issue third classes that are easily available, relatively inexpensive. And what fakers often do is they sand the surface of the order, the reverse, re-engrave the serial number, remove the serial number, engrave a new very low serial number to make it a match for the original first or second class. Second classes, even though there were fewer than 600 issued, their serial numbers can go as high as just under 2,500 or about 2,500. And we can only guess as to why, but in all likelihood, some serial number ranges remained sort of unclaimed, unused. So fewer of them were produced than the serial number alone would suggest. Far fewer produced and definitely far fewer issued. As far as I know, no great number of second classes remained in the Soviet inventory at the breakup of the USSR. In all likelihood, there were simply none. So all the second classes with high degree of probability that you're ever going to find are researchable and were issued to someone. And among other things that are very simple that you need to look at is the surface. As I said, when they remove the serial number, they have to sand the entire surface, the entire reverse. And you will see this very characteristic sanding marks, like sandblasting marks, like pock marks, all over the surface. The real order that was never messed with will always look just like this, be it second class or third class, or in theory first class, which we'll never see. You can also see that this underline of the serial number, just under the serial number, there's this raised underline. It's always raised, it's never engraved. The serial number, and this is universal for third, second, or first class, it doesn't matter, is always engraved in this manner with a rotating tool, which leaves very specific, very peculiar marks that go in the same direction. They are like a series of dashes that all look the same way, that have the same angle more or less. When you see something different, that's an immediate giveaway of a fake. And again, here's an earlier third class, but you can still see the same underline of the serial number, which is a part of the die. And even on the early issues, the engraving method was still the same. It's never hand engraved. It's never hand engraved with any other tool. The tool always remained the same. It's like basically like a tooth drill of your dentist that was used here. Only specific, of course, for manufacturing decorations. This is what they used at the mint. And there was absolutely no deviation from it. And I can just, since we are on this subject, can show you a typical fake of a second class, just to illustrate my point. And you can see the marks of the sandblasting here. You can also see that the serial. Oh, wait a minute. No, scratch that. This is the original.
Oh, hold on. Boy. Yeah.
What am I saying? Hold on. This is the original piece. I'm looking at it and I'm not seeing what I'm supposed to see. Let me see. This is a fake here. Yeah, this one is a fake. All right. So see how original has the same method of the serial number engraving and the same underline here.
Yes.
And the same kind of surface. It may not shine as brightly. It may have more patina, but it still has the same grain to it, which is not much of a grain, really.
Right.
Doesn't have any sandblasting pockmarks.
Yes.
This one definitely does. You see the signs of kind of work everywhere. You can see that it was scoured. You see the surface is rough.
Yeah.
Okay. You can also see that the serial number is engraved in a totally different manner.
Yeah.
If you compare this to this.
That's not right. Yeah.
Or this. Or this. Third, second, doesn't matter.
Yep.
It's always the same.
Is,
style is always the same. So this is your very easy and immediate way to tell. And this will probably save you from 99% of the fakes. Now, there will be situations that are a little bit harder. And we will get to that too. But let's continue with the third class just to kind of dot all the I's and cross all the T's. I already mentioned the stubby points on the earlier issues. And by earlier, I mean anything that's below 80,000 should have this form, the stubby form, chunky form of the points. Anything that's above 80,000, especially much above 80,000, 90,000 range and above for sure, has slender points. No second class will ever have this kind of points. The other thing that you may be curious about and something that to look for, perhaps, if you are a variation collector, is the country relief. And what I mean by that is on the early issues, much earlier than even this one, we are talking pieces that are in the serial number range of anywhere from 800 to 700 to maybe 22,000. So anything in that range below 22,000 will have at least a very slight or sometimes very pronounced country relief to this race. And this is on my sketch. You don't see it here because it's still a later issue than that, but you will see this sort of lines where the on the reverse of the standards. Another thing that you will notice in, again, the same serial number range is slight country relief or lines, just a shadow sort of lines, kind of imperfection almost you can call it, on the reverse where the rockets are, where the tips of the rocket, where the bottom of the rocket is and the top of the top point of the rockets, because remember these are the rockets that are symbolizing, this whole order symbolizes combined arms.
That's right.
It's the anchor, the wings, and the rocket. Some people think that since they see an anchor, it's a naval decoration. Nothing of a kind. It could be issued to anybody. But what you will see on those early issues is, first of all, country relief here, going approximately like this, almost horizontal. Here. Not here. This is universal to all of them. But I'm talking about points near the edge.
Yes.
Right? And another thing that you will see invariably is these lines in this area going like this. And this is what I kind of tried to show here, to illustrate here.
Yes.
This is the depressed part, the country relief of the rocket. And around it, near the tip, sort of kind of dotted line. And those lines, mind you, they are not engraved. They're not scratches. If you see scratches, that's again a giveaway.
No,
It's
no
somebody
business.
trying to imitate those lines. They are in relief. They're part of a die. They're very, very characteristic of the die. And what's very important, because we are now talking low serial number range, where you can find serial numbers like that on a second class, it's important to understand no second class will have this country relief. This country relief, be it on the starburst, on the reverse of the starburst, or be it near the rockets, near the tips and bottoms of the rocket, of each of the rockets, that is a peculiar feature of the third class. So one may imagine that a faker will take a third class, an original third class, with a very low serial number for a third class, and they do exist. You may find a third class that has serial number 500 or 800 or 1000 or 2000, and 1 or 2000 puts it well within the range of the second class. So it would be beneficial to a faker to put it apart, put gold plating on the tips of the rockets, put it back together, and present it as a second class. And I've seen it many times. Well, one problem. The second class is not supposed to have this country relief that is typical of low-numbered third classes. Once again, if you see country relief, it's for sure a third class. Cannot be second, cannot be first. Nothing other than, certainly nothing other than the third class. So that's, again, your additional line of defense which prevents you from buying a fake or buying an upgrade, quote unquote, which is not what you think you're buying. Lastly, the second classes that are under 800 and the third classes are under 800, they may not, the third classes in particular, may not necessarily have that country relief that I showed in this sketch, but they will have something else, and we will get to that. And one thing that I want to explain and show, and perhaps you can see some of it here. You see how the edges sort of finished roughly? You see this like kind of ledge,
yes, rough
rough finish, rough ledge near the points?
Yes.
It's not very pronounced here, but it's much more pronounced on the very, very early third classes. So a third class that has a serial number under 800, and I know it may sound complicated, but when you go slowly over this whole matter, it's easy to understand. So once again, a third class that's under 800, a more difficult case because there is no country relief. It appeared later on the later numbers. Maybe 500 and above, but for sure 800 and above. Somewhere in that neighborhood between 500 and 800 serial numbers. But they will still have this rough edge. And it will be actually more rough than what you see here. It will be a kind of very deliberately, because my guess is that the production line was not streamlined yet. The production was not perfect yet. So they had to put these finishing touches, and it was kind of askew. So whatever stem they used probably wasn't calibrated perfectly, wasn't fine-tuned yet, because this was just the initial few hundred that they produced. And by the time they got to it and started producing high serial numbers of third class or second class or first class, they had all those kinks in the system worked out.
Got it.
So, but before that happened, you see a lot of this unevenness on the edges. Again, this is a definitive sign of a third class. No second class will have it. On the second class, an original second class, no matter what serial number age, this part here will be nice and smooth.
Oh yeah.
You don't have
Very
this
smooth,
unevenness.
very smooth.
See here especially, you can very clearly see
Very
it.
smooth.
And on a lower number, there would be more of it. Whereas on this one, there's none. It's nice and straight. Nice and straight. So that's your original second class.
Wow.
So no matter how low the number,
Mm.
No matter what kind of third class or second class, there's a very definitive, absolutely ironclad difference.
Yes.
So you don't have to worry if you know all these specifics. You don't need to worry when buying the second class. It will be either original, definitely, or fake, definitely.
Mm.
There's nothing in between. There's no gray area.
Yes, I see. Wow.
Now, something else to make it even simpler. And again, very important, something that most collectors don't know. Experienced collectors do know, but I want to make it available to general public. And that is peculiarity of the majority of the second class. Vast majority of the second class, at least those that you are more likely to find on the market, that have serial numbers above 1,000.
Mm-hmm.
Above 1,000. That's the simplest case. And most of them are like that, with the serial numbers above, at least in my experience. Most that I've ever handled had serial numbers well above 1,000. They will all invariably have these very peculiar lines near the lower left and near the serial number, to the left of the serial number, between the rocket, between the bottom of the rocket here. Again, remember, it's the rocket that's depicted here. Country relief of this rocket. In this area, there will be a series of lines that you will notice under the magnifying glass. Kind of see them here with our camera, but again, there will be a larger picture that you will be able, where you will be able to see them much clearer. But you see these lines that go in this direction, parallel to the rocket?
Mm.
And there are other lines, maybe a little bit more subtle in this area, going more horizontally.
Okay.
Under the number, under and to the left of the number.
Right.
Okay. Those lines, again, are not scratches. They are a part of the die. They are raised lines. How they came about, the likeliest explanation is that at some point the stamp was brushed with something that resembles just a toothbrush. It's a tool that cleans the die to make sure that there are no foreign pieces there. There's no dust. There is no extra metal. And when they do that, they leave these tiny marks in the die from brushing.
Mm-hmm.
And these tiny marks, when they actually stamp the order, the actual metal order, they become raised. And this is what you see on original pieces, for sure. There will be, especially if you find the right angle, I think you can very well see at least part of them, the ones that go this way.
Oh, yeah. Okay, maybe we got that right there.
Okay,
yeah,
so that's one certain way to tell that that the second class is indeed second class.
Wow.
Even if it has very little gilt left or none at all,
okay.
It's still a second class.
Right.
Because it's made correctly for the second class.
Yes.
And when the number is below 1,000, you can still find similar lines in this area. And or certainly numbers above, much above that too. You see this last letter of inscription, raised inscription that says "Монетный двор," which means simply mint in Russian. The last letter, Cyrillic letter R, what looks like P to an English-speaking viewer. There are little lines just of the same nature as these ones that go sort of in parallel and continue from the R outward to the right of it.
Yeah.
And below.
Okay.
You see the continuation here?
Continuation of the line.
Yeah. These lines, they may be not easy to spot depending again on the viewing angle. But trust me, you will always, with a loop, with a 10-power loop, with good enough light, you will definitely see them. And I try to show them here on my sketch. This is what you're looking for. There is a bit of cross-hatching. The more pronounced lines go this way, and then there are lines that go kind of diagonally, and that are a little bit more faint, but still there. They go this way. And again, anything above 800 and up, if it's a second class, if it's a true second class, it will have that.
Wow.
Make it a little bit more difficult. When it's below 800, you won't notice this cross-hatching, you won't notice this line. You may notice some rudiment of these ones, but it's too subtle. And apparently they were added as the production went on, but somewhere in 800 serial number range. First this ones, and then this ones appeared. But what if your serial number is below 800? What do you do then?
Yeah.
Well, remember what I told you about the ledge? This is when this rule comes into play. If you see the order that's presented to you as the second class, and it has a serial number below 800, and there is no obvious sign of serial number change. Nobody played with the serial number, right? How can you tell if it's an original third class or an original second class? Very simple. If it has this ledge, then it's a third class. What I showed here, on any early third class, there will be this unevenness at the edge on the reverse.
That's it.
You see this like file marks?
Thursday.
Yeah. No second class, I repeat, no second class, you'll have it. If you don't see it, you're in luck.
That's it.
What you see is the original second class.
And this is second class right
and
there.
This is original second class right here.
Right. That's it. What a difference. Wow.
So that's all really you need to know to completely to be completely comfortable buying one of the second classes. Not worrying about it being original or not. Now that we've covered this, all this fine stuff, why don't we go to sizes and measures? And I think it's important. Now, with this particular order, because of its complexity, you see how many parts it consists of. You know that it's very massive and it's very large compared to your typical Soviet decoration. Very few were of this size. We are talking some of the high-end commander's orders, like order of Kutuzov or Khmelnytsky, were of about this size, but still not as massive necessarily. No. This one is really a massive piece. Oh, and for that matter, for that reason, sizes do not matter as much here in determining whether it's original or not. And one thing to understand is originals that are second class or fakes that are made out of third class, they have pretty much the same size. They have the same size, they have the same weight. Most of the fakes are made out of the easily available third classes, so it's really not of much relevance here, unfortunately. And I think we shouldn't spend too much time on it. I can demonstrate just the same what to expect, but remember, don't worry about size of this particular decoration too much or weight, unless it's a very obvious fake. Now, that being said, weighs and measures. The ones we had in the recent past, I just have a few samples and that should be enough. 57.2 height by 57.4 width. And I always quote the height first. 57.5 by 57.6. Here, then 57.9, 57.9. Perfect square. Same thing here. That's another specimen I measured. And 58.0 by 58.1. So not much of a variance despite its size. But again, remember, this is not a defense of any sort.
Yes.
From a fake made out of a real piece. Now, with a fake that's very obvious, and I'll get to those, it will be much more clear just by size and weight alone, possibly. And if you measure this one, now this one is a very obvious fake of a first class.
Oh, wow.
It's not even made of the same material.
Yeah.
Don't assume that all fakes are so easy as this one. They're not. But this one is probably not made of silver, or at least parts of it are not. It's not of the right construction. It's actually thicker than the original. Enamel is not quite there if you take a close comparison, if you compare them closely. But if you pass me the scale, please. Thank
sure.
You will notice that even the weight is wrong and the sizes possibly wrong. Here, let's make sure it's at 0.
Mm-hmm.
All right, it's 66.5. Now, originals that I measured were never as heavy. Again, it may vary pretty widely depending on just, how when it was made and what particular parts were used when they assembled it. But typically the weights are 63.6, 63.1, 61.9, 64.2, 62.6. So I haven't seen recently any that were much heavier than 64.
I see.
So you can see this one is given away even by the weight, which is excessive. But that being said, not important for this decoration as much, because fakes are unfortunately made out of real pieces.
Yeah, right.
Okay, and now that we have this covered, prices. And I will quote just a few of them that we had in recent past. First of all, third classes. We have currently one for $880. That may seem like a lot for a piece that's relatively high numbered, but the thing is, it's for Afghanistan. And what I especially like about it is that it's for a very unusual service. It's for a military prosecutor.
Oh,
who served in Afghanistan. And he got it literally in the last weeks, if not days, of Soviet presence there.
Wow.
So apparently morale of the Soviet army was not very high, even as they were leaving, and some measures had to be taken. And he was probably busy there, because beside this decoration, he was also awarded this Order of the Red Star later on. And it's just a very interesting and unusual case. The ones awarded for Afghanistan, for the war in Afghanistan, typically command the premium. We had one in 2022 that was issued to a navigator of a military transport airplane that literally saved his crew and his airplane when a rocket was fired at them. He was the first to spot the contrail, and he took immediate evasive actions, probably in the role of a pilot at that point. Or at least he warned the pilots. It wasn't very clear from the commendation, but he was instrumental in saving the crew and the ship and the aircraft. And that one sold for $1,100. Other typically may be researched, but they are not always as glorious and interesting. We had one pretty recently in 34,000 serial number range. So, relatively low number, nothing particularly important, but that fellow was an interesting part of the military, dealing with development of tanks. In any case, that one sold for $740. We had a 4-digit one in 23, in February, early 23. 4-digit meant that, of course, it was one of the very early country relief pieces. With very distinct country relief, that sold for approximately $900. Almost a year earlier, one in 120,000 range. Now we are talking almost for sure an issued piece, and indeed there was no research with it. Sold for $440. Current price for an unresearchable, very high numbered third class should be a little bit higher than that, but somewhere in that neighborhood anyway. So maybe $500. As opposed to, again, what we currently have for a nicely researched piece for Afghanistan. And in 21, a researched piece in 75 serial number range, $495. So they went quite a bit up, and there is one more, 137,000, again, unresearchable for sure. It's an unissued piece, almost certainly. In 21 sold for $345. Today, even such an unresearchable piece, unissued, would be much more. Would probably be $150 more, if not more. So that's your story of the third class. This is a second class. Of course, the picture is completely different as far as the prices, because this is really a rare award. I think it's actually underappreciated. The reason is the prevalence of the fakes. Many collectors mistakenly believe that they have an original second,
Yep.
not first class in their collection, and in fact they are nothing but just fake upgrades from the third class.
Oh boy.
In 2019, we had one sold with a very low serial number but no document. And by the way, if it's a very low serial number, what I mean by that is number below 4-digit.
Wow.
Or below 5-digit, I should say.
5-digit. Yeah.
So any 4-digit, 3-digit, 2-digit number and such should have zeros preceding the number. So if it's a number, let's say 25, it won't be just 25. It will be 0025. If it's a number 100 and something, it will be 0, 100 and something.
Yeah, 011. Yeah.
So again, if you see one without the zeros, that's an immediate red flag. You don't have to go further than that.
Right.
It's a fake number.
Yep.
That sold for $4,900. In 2018, second class, 3,000 range, 2,700. In 2016, a group of two. Now that is interesting because they're rarely available as a group. Just same as Order of Glory, second and third class. It's always a big premium. They come in a group, especially documented. That sold for $5,800 without paperwork, just research demonstrating that this wins in fact the same individual. There was an award card. Same story, 2019, 6,400, and here we had two documents actually, and we also had second class that was with extraordinarily low number, 0, 4 something, so 4-digit serial number, preceded as it should by 0. And the third class was very low number as well. So that's 6,400. And to show that the picture may not be so rosy if you are just an investor, you have to be careful about that. Remember what I mentioned about the bubble in 2008? This huge, insane, you could say, tulip market in Soviet decorations.
Sure.
When prices went
doubling.
And then, of course, first doubling every half a year or so.
Doubling, yes.
And then they crashed, and they crashed real badly. Well, in 2008, at the peak of prices, a second class was sold for $6,500. So it took quite a nosedive, but maybe not as huge a nosedive as you would expect if it were a little bit more common. So 6,500 as opposed to 2,700 years later may seem like a lot of a downgrade, but these prices are coming up again, and I see them selling for much more than that now, maybe double. And it's I shouldn't say that it's a complete reverse of this price situation, but it's definitely heading that way. So it's still a good time, in my opinion, to get a second class, especially now that you are armed with knowledge and know how to tell an original versus a fake. It's not just my word; it's general knowledge about experienced collectors. So you can absolutely take it for granted.
Yes.
And now that you are well equipped, you can look for your second class order of service to the Homeland. Just to sum it up, one example that I wanted to show of an actual numbered decoration that's not only researched but also have an award documentation with it. And this is this piece here that I just showed you, is 44,000 serial number.
Oh, nice.
44,141. This is how a typical award document of the period looks like. 1981. It's interesting that they omitted the date of issue of the actual document here, but in all likelihood it was issued on the same date as the date of the award decree. That was common practice later in the Soviet era. So February 1981. All this already in the Afghan war period. This is not for Afghanistan per se, but again, another nice feature here is the picture of the officer. Now you always have to take pictures very skeptical with great degree of skepticism in any Soviet award document, because especially in the post-war period, the pictures were not required and were an exception, not a rule. But here there was probably no reason to fake it, to add a foreign, picture that doesn't belong here. So in all likelihood, even though you don't see a stamp, this is something that he put in there, the original owner. I have every reason to believe that this is actually him. And what's additional plus is that even without research, we know what he did. We know he was an airman, and that corresponds with the photograph. You can see that he is wearing a uniform of an Air Force major.
Yes.
2 stripes, and you see the insignia of Air Force. And this is a very nice extra kind of icing on the cake, a special document, honorary diploma or honorary certificate that was issued by the Supreme Commander of the Soviet Air Forces, Marshal of Aviation Yefimov, hand-signed by the Marshal.
Wow.
In 1987. Now you see it's quite a distance between 1981, when he received this decoration, and 1987. So we don't know what exactly he did, but he must have done something very significant. It wasn't just a congratulatory letter, greetings for receiving, say, order for service to the homeland. He did something really extraordinary to get this diploma or this honorary certificate from the Marshal. It has his name here, and it says that for your irreproachable service in the armed forces, and thereby give you a special letter of gratitude. I wish you good health, success in your public and political life, as well as your labor for the benefit of our motherland. It almost sounds like he probably retired at that point, and this was his farewell. But again, it went far above and beyond what an average officer would receive. So this is definitely a very interesting individual who received this award. And with that, I guess we will conclude our discussion of order for service to the homeland.
Very interesting.
And
rich in detail.
I hope you found the details enough.
Oh yes.
And not too boring.
Obscure information.
And yes, that's really something you must know if you ever plan to collect this order, especially its second class. It's more than meets the eye.
That's it.
But it's also less dangerous than many people believe. And I just had this conversation a couple of months ago with a collector and friend who bought this, what he hoped, second class from someone and was in doubt. So this information is not this easily available. Even to experienced collectors in some cases. He had his doubts. And when I explained to him what to look at, the specific details that he must find, he of course realized that this was nothing other than a copy. But hopefully now it's the information available to everybody.
That's it. And we're finding out on this channel only. It's as simple as that. Okay. Thank you, Igor.
You're very welcome, Jimmy.
All right. Much appreciated. Until next time, folks. Toodaloo. What I'm guessing here is that we're going from the scarcities and rarities of the Cold War to a rare bargain.
Yes, I hope after we taste it we could say that. But one thing for certain, this wine is more than immediately meets the eye. And you have to look beyond the immediate label, beyond what's obvious. And what's obvious is that this is Medoc. And it's 2019. It doesn't boast of any special achievements. We're not talking Cru Bourgeois, we're not talking Grand Cru or Grand Cru Classé. So who knows? Medoc is still a good wine. It's a big area. It could be better or worse, but it's never terrible in my experience. Especially for a good year. 19 is still a good year.
Oh, 2019.
Yeah, maybe not in other respects, but as far as winemaking, it was okay.
Yes.
It's a little bit young, but it's not bad already. I'm sure it's going to be drinkable. We're talking 5 years old.
Okay.
But here's the interesting part. Look at this little sign here. The logo.
It's an R.
And an R here. You see these arrows. You know whose trademark this is?
Robin Hood?
Almost.
Okay.
Baron Rothschild.
Oh, The Baron Rothschild.
The Baron, the family. They
I
were
see.
not only the bankers, but they are also, and still, were and still are, very famous winemakers. And some
Okay.
of the best estates in Medoc specifically belong to Rothschilds. There are two, you could say the most famous and most expensive ones in Bordeaux, that are Mouton Rothschild
Mm-hmm.
and Lafitte Rothschild.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And those would cost thousands of dollars, any bottle,
Mm-hmm.
from any year, especially
Right.
a good year. They're really top notch. This is one of the estates. It's just not as well known and publicized, and it doesn't have the same status, of course, nearly,
Mm-hmm.
but it's still the same winemakers. So I can bet, without trying it, that it's going to be a decent wine at the very least.
Okay.
And of course, for a song, because you don't buy Rothschild wines
At affordable price.
at affordable. Generally speaking, this one was very affordable.
Okay.
So let's give it a try and see
Okay.
if it's worth the money.
Absolutely. Yes, yes. And once again, ladies and gentlemen, just pay attention to how Professor Igor Moiseev handles this bottle top here. All right. Once again, you got to deal with the rascally cork.
Lots amateur. That's why.
You got you got to do this
I
right.
know my medals, but why?
No,
not
no,
really,
no.
I'm just a bit.
Oh, come on. You're a humble man. Right? Look at that technique. Look at that technique. And this is old school technique right there. Yep, we got that pop.
That's not what you're supposed to hear. You're supposed to hear nothing.
What?
If
We're
I
not-
were
okay.
a professional, there would be no pop.
Okay. Okay. What
We'll
the heck
go-
do I know?
we'll
Anyway,
we'll
it sounds
with-
impressive.
We'll go with the pop.
Okay.
Okay, let's give it
Oh,
a try.
not too much. Remember, I'm Asian. Yes.
You are Asian?
Someone told me. All right
I
then.
would have never guessed.
Very nice. Okay. Okay. Nice. Is yeah. Wow. Yes. Ooh. Yes. It's red. Okay. Yes. And as you mentioned before, if it
Nice,
smells
subtle.
if it smells like cork, that means the wine went bad or
Yeah,
something.
no,
No. It should
cork-
not smell
the
like cork.
was fine. I should have. Yeah, no, it's fine.
Okay.
No problem, Mr. Cork.
Fragrant.
Yeah. Again,
Yes.
you can immediately feel that this is Medoc quality. This is
Got you. Got you.
It's going to be tannic. It's not as fruity as
Right.
some other wines.
Oh yes.
It's very, very specifically Medoc quality.
Oh, yeah.
Not just by the way.
And it doesn't stink. I mean,
No,
it's
I hope
it's
not.
quite no, it's quite opposite. Yeah.
Subtle.
Wow.
Develops nicely.
I got
It's
what you're
very
saying.
deep.
Like it's in your mouth and then you swallow it.
It doesn't strike you right away, but there is a lot there.
Oh boy. Wow.
See, aftertaste,
Yeah. Yeah.
there are all kinds of different
Yeah.
tones.
Oh, the aftertaste. Fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Something that lingers on your tongue for a long time.
Wow. Yeah, ladies and gentlemen.
very
Wow.
decent.
I mean, one day there'll be some doodad or gadget on your computer where you're able to taste and smell. But for now, you just got to take our word for it.
Just believe us.
Wow, Igor, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome, Johnny,
Wow.
as always.
I wonder why I keep coming back here. Oh. It's an awareness that one must develop because every millisecond something is happening,
Yeah.
and as a process of swallowing, you
Exactly
can't just
the
gulp it.
mark of a great wine that it talks to you, and it
That's the word.
it has a message, and,
Yes.
and the message is not very simple.
It talks to you as opposed
it has
to like
many different things to say.
that's right, as opposed to
It's
like
not shallow. Just
right.
doesn't hit you over the head.
I mean, I used to have shoes that talked to me because they broke,
Okay,
but
that
that's
you
a
may
different
not want.
that's a different kind of talking. But this one, yeah, it's talking. Oh yeah, it's talking. Yep. Yeah, like you said, mellow. That's the word that comes to mind. You know,
Beautiful aftertaste.
right?
Very
Oh,
balanced.
yeah, yeah. That's when wine enthusiasts have a common thought. They have a meeting of the minds, when the words match. Yes, mellow.
Look at the tears.
The tears. Yes, yes. Some people call it legs, but I rather, yeah, I like the word tears. Yeah. And what kind of food would pair with this?
Lamb would be nice.
Lamb would be nice. Yeah.
Beef, maybe beef tartare or beef, even burgers.
Hamburgers.
Even hamburger, yeah.
Yes, the humble hamburger.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I can see a hamburger with this.
That's right. That's right.
But anything, yeah, any beef, all lamb. Lamb will be nice with this too.
Yes, yes.
This one is, it's not gonna overpower
Right.
lamb.
Right. Yes, yes. That distinctive lamb flavor goes very
This
will
will
go
go
very
nice
well
with
with
it,
it. Will go very well. Well. Ladies and gentlemen, we're not just whistling Dixie. When we mention a wine, try to look for it. Okay, we're not getting well. I mean, nobody's getting commission here.
I wish.
You just out of his pocket, and me like a bum, hobo off the street. I'm just having a free taste. But anyway, that's
look it up online.
yeah, seriously. And that website you recommend to
one of them is Invino, Invino.
INVINA.
INO.
Oh,
Vino.
Invino.
Yeah.
INVINO.
Right. INO.
Mm-hmm.
And one that I particularly like
Excuse
a
me.
lot,
Mhm.
is Saratoga Wine Shop
Oh, New York.
in upstate New York.
There we go.
Yeah.
There we go. Saratoga Wine Shop.
They're just great.
Yes, yes. God bless New York. It's coming back. Yep. Oh, fantastic. Oh, fantastic. All right. Once again, salute to America. Yes, and all the mom and pops out there. God bless.